Welcome all to what is a somewhat early start here in the United States East Coast for our US-Japan program seminar, and certainly a late night for those of you who might be watching in Japan, as well, of course, as a late night for our speaker, Patrick Harlan. I want to thank the program in US-Japan Relations, its staff, Shin Fujihira, Amy Stockton, Emma Duncan, Sophie Welsh for their help in putting today's event together at our special time. But it's a special event not mainly because of the time, but because of the guest. It's such a privilege to introduce to you and bring to you Patrick Harlan as a speaker at Harvard. It's something I've been wanting to do for quite some time, but the work routine of a so-called tarento in Japan is, whether it's a native Japanese or a foreigner, is punishing. It's very hard to take time off. And it seems an impossible dream for Pakkun, as he's known to be able to take the time off for even a short visit to Harvard to speak here. But then, if we can thank the pandemic, it may be distasteful to thank the pandemic for anything, but the pandemic has brought some benefit, at least to all of us here on the event today, which is the possibility with virtual programming to bring a tremendous speaker from Japan. And so here we are. I first met Pat Harlan in 2002 when I was on a sabbatical in Japan. At the time, as I recall, he can correct me if I misremember, he was wondering about returning to the United States to go to grad school in anthropology for a PhD and draw on his first-hand knowledge of the Geinokai, the entertainment world in Japan, to write a dissertation. I'm sure it would have been a fabulous PhD dissertation. And the academic in me was kind of intrigued and excited about the prospect. But as I thought about it, and with all due respect to dissertation writers in the audience of any discipline, maybe 50 people would have read the dissertation. Maybe a few hundred more would have read it if it was a monograph. We talked about the trade-offs between staying the course with his career or trying something different. And in the end, Patrick decided to stay the course. Academia's loss was the gain of all of his fans, and I think the gain for Patrick himself. He's been a comedian, is a comedian. He's a TV personality. He's a news commentator. His career has flourished since then. It was already flourishing, but even to a greater degree. He's done things such as host a very popular NHK English language program that I enjoyed watching, not so much to learn English, but to see how it was presented. Eigo de shaberanai to. There's a lovely pun in the title of that show that I won't unpack for you all. He's moderated since 2015 a news program, Gaikokujin Kisha wa Mita, through foreign journalists' eyes. He's been an anchor on Fuji Television's Sunday Hodo Prime Sunday, a news magazine show. He's appeared in the New Year's Eve, probably one of the most watched TV shows in Japan, the Kohaku Tagasen, and many other TV appearances. He's interviewed celebrities from the sublime to the ridiculous. I'm not sure which you'll think is which, but there's Al Gore, Tom Cruise, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Coldplay, Usher, and reported from the 2016 presidential debates, acted in the Taiga drama, the most important drama series in Japan. And without even getting his PhD, he's become an adjunct professor at Tokyo Institute of Technology, 2012 to the present, and has also written 3 books, the third of which has just appeared. Here it is on the screen, Gyakko Ryoku. It's got a longish subtitle, which I won't read or translate for you, because today Patrick will be talking about some of the material that's in this book as well as other things, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. So let me just turn the event over to Pakkun. Thank you so much. Oh, before doing that, a couple of announcements. Our next US-Japan program event will be a symposium on February 22nd. Please note the time. This will be an evening time in the United States, East Coast, 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. On Japanese economic statecraft and China. And then finally, a bit of Zoom etiquette and housekeeping. Most of you are quite familiar with this, so I'm not going to read it all in detail, but importantly, keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. If you have questions, you can write and ask them in chat. and use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen to raise a hand virtually. And the program is being recorded. Please do not take screenshots and such of the event. All right, off we go.
All right, is that me? Is that my cue?
That is your cue.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored for the invitation. And it's especially heartwarming to see so many of my friends and actually some of the members of my family in the audience as well. Those of you who've spoken with me over the last 20 years can attest to the fact that my English is not as good as it was when I was at Harvard. I don't use it that much, so it's a little rusty. And I need to lower the hurdle, lower the bar. I'll let you know that I'm not a professional English comedian. I tell jokes in Japanese. If you want me to do that, you're going to have to pay me more. But I think I could provide a little entertainment and perhaps a little education for the evening, or in our time, the morning your time, and hopefully you can all escape an hour of otherwise dreary Corona-filled, COVID-filled life. Perhaps I should start by saying thank you to Diana Eck, who is here with us. She's the head of my department at Harvard, the comparative study of religion. And of course, my father's in the audience, who of course deserves a big thank you as well. So today we're talking about one of the most pressing issues of our time, me. And you know, Harvard has found the foremost leading expert on the subject. So let's turn it over to him, me. I'm often asked here in Japan why I would go to Harvard, get this awesome degree, and then become a comedian in Japan of all places. The insinuation, of course, is that it's like sacrilege. It's like buying a Gutenberg Bible to use when you run out of toilet paper. I tell people like that Harvard isn't like that. Not everyone has to be like an elite business person or a lawyer. I tell them that, you know, there are lots of comedians who graduate from Harvard. They're actors and writers and playwrights, and in the broader sense of people peddling baseless fiction, Ted Cruz, not Tom Cruise, but Ted Cruz. So give me a little respect. Harvard is probably proud of how I'm using my degree, and I'm glad to have this chance to prove it. All right, so let's get down to the main topic. My inexplicable journey from Colorado Paperboy to comedian and commentator in Japan. I prepared about twice as much material as I'm going to speak today, tell you tonight, but please ignore the weird gaps. That's where I'm editing in my mind. So starting off quickly, I was born in Montana, raised in Colorado. There's my dad 50 years ago. Colorado, for most of you, probably looks like this, but for me, it looked like this and this. Beautiful place, wonderful place to grow up. My folks actually got separated and then divorced when I was young. My dad moved out of state. My sister moved in with my dad for most of my life. It was just me and my mom, my upbringing. Times were tight. She was in and out of work a lot, but we got by with exquisite budgeting, including drinking a lot of powdered milk. For those of you who've never had it, it basically tastes like it came from powdered cows, thoroughly desiccated cows before they milk it. We also ate a lot of ground turkey, which at the time was cheaper than ground beef. And I think, just judging from the taste, that the difference is that ground beef is made from the meat of the cow, whereas ground turkey, they probably use the whole thing, feathers, talons, chicken wire, and fence posts as well. But we got by. Things were tight, but somehow we survived. And actually, Colorado, the government, the law at that point, provided an excellent solution for families in our situation: child labor. So right after my 10th birthday, I got my very first paper route. I started delivering the Gazette Telegraph to 40 houses in our neighborhood on this bicycle. I would get up early every morning, fold the papers, insert the advertisements, and then ride around the neighborhood. When I got to be 16 years old, I got a car, got my license, and I expanded that route to 440 houses at one point. It was crazy, but I was still riding my bicycle every morning too, up and down the foothills of Colorado with like 50 pounds of papers. So I got incredible thighs, thighs like NFL linemen. I don't mean like linemen's thighs. I mean like actual linemen, like Reggie White on one side and Mean Joe Green on the other. They're huge. And I used these thighs for sports, played sports all the time. But I also acted and sang in choir. And I loved playing dress up and pretend. I was a hound for attention. I craved attention like a personal injury lawyer craves a 30-car pileup. It was nuts. And I did all these activities after school in the afternoons and evenings. And then I would get up at 3:30 a.m. and throw my paper out again. It was nuts. I did this 365 days a year pretty much, even like the morning after prom night. This, by the way, is, oh, where'd it go? This is my prom night picture right here. I went stag. But the photo was included in the price of the ticket. So my friend suggested I take a photo with the fire extinguisher. Their reason was that it always puts out. Okay, so I got into Harvard, probably on the quota for goofy kids from flyover states. But I got in, and I will skip most of my Harvard time because we're short on time, and most of you probably had similar experiences. But the Paperboy in me stayed active at Harvard. He played volleyball, he sang in the Glee Club, and I worked all through the school. I worked in the dorm crew, cleaning the dorms, both for the money, which is pretty good, but also for the perks. For those of you who don't know, they let you keep the little fragments of soap you find in the showers. It's a good deal. Then in 1993, I graduated with a degree from the comparative study of religion. Thank you, Diana. And I moved to Japan to teach English because, well, I had a degree in the comparative study of religion. What else am I going to do? Now, I'm actually not dissing the major. It was excellent. It gave me the tools to approach life in a new culture. And actually, looking back on it, it may have been sort of destiny for me to study that and then come to Japan. Because over the course of my 4 years at college, I sort of gave up on religion, stopped really believing. But then over the next 30 years, some things sort of happened to make me believe in divine intervention again. That's foreshadowing, by the way. For example, 1993, the Harvard Glee Club was coming to Japan. I got a free plane ticket. And my best friend from home had a job over here. I got a sofa. He invited me to come stay, get a job. I said yes. So together, he and I took the leap. That's him, by the way, Patrick Gaston. He and I started living in Fukui Prefecture, where he was assigned to work as an English teacher. I just came to be close to him. And I took my resume around the neighborhood, knocked on doors, and actually got a job teaching English in like a couple of weeks. Amazing. Maybe a miracle. I was just at Harvard. I was really excited about education. So I reworked the school's curriculum. I created new games and exercises, assigned a lot of homework, and this landed like a lead balloon on a neutron star. It was terrible. But then I had an epiphany. I realized the students at this school weren't really there to learn English, but just to be friends, hang out with a foreigner. So I did that. We just hung out and talked in Japanese. In the end, I was making $25 an hour learning Japanese from my students. Is that a miracle or a scam? Hard to tell. They're often kind of similar. And once again, living in Fukui, I found time to focus on extracurriculars. I played volleyball with a great local team. Oh, this is my friends and family in Fukui. But I was very active, played volleyball, skied, hiked, snowmobiled, jet skied. It was great. And I made a bunch of wonderful friends. And it's sort of a second family to me out there, too. And to use a prosaic phrase, I fell in love with the country. So what's so great about Japan? Well, let's look at it. First of all, plastic food, unmatched around the world. But there's more to it than that. It's safe. It's polite. When my friends come to Japan and ask me what to do, I'd say, drop your wallet. It'll come back. It's amazing. Turns up all the time. I dropped my wallet 3 times in 2019, it came back every time. And like the money, still in it. Not a yen missing. Sometimes it comes back with more than when I dropped it. People have pity on me. Who knows? Anyway, safe, polite, wonderful country. But more than anything, perhaps this is what really hooked me: the intellectual stimulation. I'm sure going anywhere, any foreign country, you're going to get, you know, new cuisine, new culture. Here in Japan, we have multiple types of vending machines. We have 6 different types of towel. We have a new prime minister every 10 days or so back in the day. There's always something new to learn. But most of all, I found the language fascinating. I know a lot of you out there are studying Japanese too. So I'm sure this is all sort of old information to you. But Japanese, to me, it's the first language that I sort of chose to study on my own. And it was amazing. It was what's the word? It fit with me. The grammar is very logical. It's like a mathematical equation. The pronunciation is very similar to Spanish, which I'd studied both at Harvard and Taco Bell. And it just sort of clicked. A lot of people hate the script, for example, but I didn't mind. I learned the script, hiragana and katakana, on the flight over, so that when I arrived at Narita Airport, I could read Okaeri nasai, which is in the phonetic script. I didn't know what it meant, but I could read it. It means welcome home. Strangely prescient, this message. What else? How about kanji? Oh, I'm sorry. Hiragana and katakana. How did I memorize it? I just made up a system. Key looks like a key to me. This is the sound key for those of you who don't know. No looks like my nostril. Nose. No. Totally obvious. Same thing with the kanji, the Chinese characters. These are tough for a lot of people, but they sort of make sense. I have a good friend, a comedian here named Atsugiri Jason, who does this bit, but he says it's intuitively obvious. This is one. One line means one. 2 lines means 2. 3 lines means 3. It's obvious, right? So simple. 4 is, this is where he goes, why Japanese people? That's his traditional gag. Yeah, I have no idea where this came out. It's not 4 lines, it's crazy. But not all of them are crazy. Some of them, actually most of them, make sense. And you can make them make sense if you figure out your own system. For example, that sort of looks like a person, like the fingers walking in the old Ma Bell ads, right? That looks like a tree to me. If you put these two together, a person and a tree. On one side, there's a person. On the other side, there's a tree. You put them together, you get take a break. A person sitting by a tree. It's so easy. But not all of these are easy at first glance. You have to sort of make up stories. This is what I did for the harder ones. For example, Dr. Gordon, I'm sure knows, but this kanji means flea. Doesn't necessarily look like a flea to most people, but there's a way to remember it. This top part is a homonym for the word that means crotch, and the bottom part means bug. You got a bug in your crotch? It's probably a flea. That's how I remember it. And this actually comes up quite a bit in other kanji. If you have a bug in your crotch, you use your, where'd it go? There's a bug, there's a crotch. You can use your hand, and what do? You scratch it. If a horse has a bug in its crotch, it's going to go crazy, riot, panic. These are all, not necessarily what these kanji are supposed to mean, but it made sense to me. I just used my imagination. And with tricks like these, I was able to memorize enough kanji to pass the highest level of the Japanese proficiency test in about 2 years, which is pretty good for an arrogant American. But even after 2 years of study, I hadn't really mastered it enough to be on live radio waves. but I still got on them. That's a bit of a problem. The first time I embarrassed myself during a live broadcast was when I was still in Fukui. I'd been in a theater group and I joined a local radio station as a volunteer DJ. And we were covering the World Gymnastics Championships. And Dr. Gordon, I may have told you this story, but we were talking about the Japanese men's parallel bars. I don't know how many of you out there know how to say parallel bars in Japanese, but it's heikobo. Definitely remember it, heikobo. It's fairly difficult. I was, still a beginner, and I was pretty proud of myself for knowing this, so I decided to use it in a sentence. And I said that I was really impressed with the Japanese men's performance on the heikobo. Unfortunately, the H and the K got reversed, and I said whole cable, which means uncircumcised pole on national radio. This is good. Which is where I discovered another charm of Japan. You can embarrass yourself, but despite the fact that it's the country of harakiri, people are very forgiving. The director of that show, after he heard me embarrass him and the whole team on the radio, he was actually the guy who invited me to come out to Tokyo and try my hand at Japanese show business. So I did, in a little bit. But first I had to get more used to Japan. And there are a couple more things I'd like to introduce to you about the country, which took me a little bit of time to learn. First of all, it's very high context culture. Everyone here knows that you don't sit on the train. They know that if you want to know a kanji, you can just write it on your palm and everyone will get it. They know that any disagreement, no matter how big, can be solved with rock, paper, scissors. Everyone knows everything about everything. Common sense is much more common. And this makes it sort of tricky for us foreigners sometimes to understand what they're saying because they skip over things like nouns and verbs. If you walk into a store and they want to say, "Hello, sir, how may I help you today?" They might just abbreviate that into today. It's bizarre. If I want to ask my manager what my schedule is for tomorrow, I don't have to say, "So what's my schedule tomorrow?" I can just say, "Tomorrow." It's like magic. Next time you all come to Japan, I advise you to find a Japanese person and ask them to sing the Beatles' great Yesterday. See what happens. They'll sing, "Yesterday," which might be because they don't know the lyrics, but I'm pretty sure it's just because one word says it all in Japanese. It's amazing. Anyway, this trend of leaving out subjects and verbs is just one of many pitfalls we foreigners face here. Another common one is a polite rejection. People choosing a method of expression which isn't very direct, but for a Japanese person, it's obvious. For example, often you hear this phrase, "No to ienai Nihonjin." Japanese people can't say no. It's a common trope, but it's not actually true. After about 10 years in the country, you sort of realize what's going on. For example, if you're having a business meeting and you make a proposal to your counterpart and they say, "Oh, zehi kore o mochikaeri sashite kudasai," which means, "Let me take this home, back to the team, we'll think about it." This basically means no. If they say, "Oh, we'll think about it positively," this also means no. If they say, "Let's do it," that also means no. And strangely enough, after about 20 years, you get this one. But if you take a proposal and you hand it to your counterpart and say, "I've got this great idea. I think we can do it on this budget with this time frame. What do you think?" And they say, inhaling also means no. Very confusing. Sometimes it can mean yes too. It's just nasty. But I love it. I love the polite rejection. I love the ambiguity. I love the constant caring for other people's feelings. It's marvelous. So I fell in love with the country, and after a couple of years working in Fukui, I paid off my college debt, and I was free to follow my dreams, which of course meant going back to Hollywood, you might think. But that's where I started thinking about the competition. Obviously, there are other smart, handsome guys who look much like me working in American showbiz already. My fellow Harvard man, Matt Damon, was doing big things back then. And it felt, it just wouldn't be fair to him and the others for me to come steal their thunder. But the Japanese entertainment industry, on the other hand, seemed to be suffering from a shortage of handsome, talented, and modest foreign actors. So I could move to Tokyo and not be afraid of putting anyone out of work but me. And honestly, in a little quarter of my mind, that was the plan. I was going to go boil that ocean, try to make it in a foreign country, in a foreign language as an actor. It'd be crazy. I'd fail. I'd have a good story for my grandchildren, but it would give me incentive to move back to America. That was the plan. Things didn't go according to plan. I moved to Tokyo in 1996, and that's when an angel appeared. I decided I wanted to be an actor, but a friend of mine said, don't hold yourself back. If you want to do something, put it on your business card, and people will start hiring you. He was a veteran in the scene here, and that's apparently what he did. And it worked for him, so I tried it. I made a card that had my title, actor, but also voice actor, DJ, narrator, model, translator. It was great. I had never done most of those things professionally, but I put it on my card, and people started hiring me. Like Blanche Dubois said, I've always depended on the gullibility of strangers. Occasionally I got in trouble. Someone hired me to DJ at a club, totally different skill. Can't do that. And also a policeman pulled me over for speeding, and I tried to get out of the ticket pretending I didn't speak English. And then he noticed the translator on my business card. Didn't work out so well. But in general, it did. And I got to do commercials. I did voiceovers, underwear ads, narrations, and of course, I got to act. It was good. I had a lot of fun parts, but there was a problem I noticed after about a year. The parts weren't particularly big or recurring. It was like Sailor B, Businessman A, Lost Tourist. It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of long-term potential there. But then another angel appeared. I was complaining about the lack of significant acting roles, and a friend of a friend suggested I try doing comedy. This is the mid to late 90s. Japan was in the midst of a comedy boom. He said if I did comedy, I could become famous, and then people would write roles just for me. Well, he was half right. His name was Mr. Sasaki, and he introduced me to Mr. Makoto Yoshida. And together we formed Pakkun Makkun. We started just working up skits together and performing in them on the streets. They used to close off the streets to through traffic on Sundays, and you could practice whatever art you had there. It was great. And a series of miracles occurred here. For example, from the audience in one of these shows on the street emerged the woman who would be my wife. And from my wife, a little while later, emerged our children. But we'll save that for another slideshow. My partner and I practiced on the street, and then we started auditioning. We got into the biggest comedy shows in the country, and then we got cast to do this afternoon show every weekday for 6 years. We read the newspaper on national TV. Read the newspaper on TV. I know it's weird, but who was I to say no? And this led to other things. We got to do travel shows, eating shows. We host a think in English, kotohin, old stuff, antique show, a traveling antique show. And also we got to perform our English Manzai in America, in Las Vegas at the Plaza Hotel, which Donald Trump owned, and at the legendary Comedy Store in Hollywood. Let me tell you a little bit about Manzai, since that's our chosen art form. It's similar to old art forms in America. We used to have two-person comedy, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, Trump and Pence. That's actually a joke I used in Las Vegas back when it was Bush and Cheney. But uh, it's similar to American comedy up to a point. For example, there's the footy, which is the setup, and the bouquet, which is the punchline. And this would probably be it in America. George and Gracie Burns. George Burns says, "Say goodnight, Gracie." And Gracie says, "Good night, Gracie." And that's it. In Japan, we add one more step called the tsukomi, which is the correction or the rebuke. So the straight man responds to the punchline almost every time. I'll give you an example. I don't know where this picture came from, but it looks like a phone conversation, so I wrote it as a phone conversation. May I have your name, please? What? I'm using it. Don't you have one of your own? Here's the tsukomi. What? No. Tell me your name for the reservation. Strangely enough, if you don't say this, you don't get as much of a laugh. The tsukomi is the laugh point. It explains the joke to the audience, and they know that it's time to laugh, which actually is really helpful because it broadens the strike zone, let's say. You can do something pretty random. You could do a very minor, minuscule bouquet punchline. And if your partner gets it, he can make it funny for the audience. You can do an obscure reference, for example. You don't have to do "Beam Me Up, Scotty" every time. You can do something from, A Streetcar Named Desire. And people laugh because he tells them what it means, and they don't want to seem like they've never seen a streetcar named Desire. Anyway, what was especially useful for me learning Manzai was that this tsukomi, the correction, can be a way to reverse engineer a joke. For example, same telephone conversation, different tsukomi. You've got the wrong century. So obviously, the bouquet, the punchline, was something that was from the wrong time frame. Maybe it was Morse code. Maybe he was telegraphing it. Beep, 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 beep. Or maybe he said, "Hello? Yes, I have a smoke signal here for Mr. Yoshida. You've got the wrong century." Not hilarious, but a good start, right? If this were a master class, I'd give you all an assignment here. I'd say, all right, here are the tsukomi. You've got the wrong century. I'm not your mom. We're not that kind of hotel. Or that would never fit. Or perhaps, who are you, Nostradamus? If this were a master class, I'd assign these, have you write punchlines, and then I'd grade them and steal the best material. Unfortunately, we're not that kind of class here today. Anyway, I reverse engineered the style of Manzai, got it pretty well, but I was a little bit caught up by the difference in subject matter. In America, we talk sex and politics, and we have jokes. In Japan, we don't have jokes. We don't tell like a man walked into a bar kind of thing. What do? We don't do any of these. We do short sketches, one-time gags, and everyday situation character humor. It's a little bit more, I want to say a little less formulaic because there's not a joke pattern, but it's still got a formula and a format. And it's a little bit different what makes it funny. So what makes something funny? That's the question. It's not politics here in Japan. As Peter McGraw, who studies worldwide humor at University of Colorado, put it in his seminal work, The Humor Code, the Japanese government is too stable, and the elections here are too sedate, and the emperor too sacred for people to crack wise about political affairs. The pillars of American comedy, like politics, are completely off the radar here. He actually quotes a leading expert on this one. I couldn't have mixed that metaphor better myself. But he actually has an interesting theory about what makes something funny. He says it's a benign violation, something that breaks the rules, but isn't damaging or hurtful in too drastic a way. Just enough of an outlaw presence or an outlaw kind of renegade kind of feeling is funny. That's what he says. And I think this actually applies differently in Japan and in America. In America, we've got really thick skin. We have a much smaller subset of behavior that which we consider violations. So you've got all these things which you are considered benign. You have to really push the envelope to get to a violation. In Japan, lots more things are considered violations. The well-established norms, the values, the expectations. That means that you can violate something pretty easily, but you have to be careful not to slip out of the benign. That doesn't mean that Japanese humor is less advanced or well thought out or deep. I mean, the overlapping area is actually the same. It's just how you go about it is a little bit different. So if we have 30 seconds, would you like to see an example of Japanese humor in action? Well, I can't even hear you, but I'm going to do it anyway. Here we go. This is a short sketch that I performed with my partner downstairs this morning, just for you.
We don't have any volume.
You don't have any volume?
No.
How about if I do this? Oh, no. Nope. All right. That's not good. So, okay. It's hilarious. If you could hear it, it's hilarious. I'll fix it and show it to you later. Anyway, so at this point in my career, this is probably 20 years ago. I think I was safely able to add this line to my business card: comedian. And after that, I got all sorts of new titles, including author. Dr. Gordon mentioned 3 books, but I've actually offered like 12. The most recent one is on poverty, which you mentioned, talking about the difference in sort of the appearance of poverty here in Japan and in America. It's a pretty good book, I think, but it's definitely a labor of love. I'm not planning on getting rich writing about poverty. Although paradoxes like that aren't impossible, right? I have a lot of friends in high school who got laid in the abstinence club, for example. Anyway, in addition to authoring books, they also let me, oops, I just skipped a whole bunch, but they also let me, here we go, illustrate. I illustrated a children's book, and they let me do panels for the government, like on environment and tourism. They let me put out a CD, and I did an impromptu duet with Josh Groban. The wheels on the bus really go round and round when he sings it. What else? Did we skip ahead? Oh, yes. They let me be an adjunct professor, which is hard to believe. And I was going to turn him down because I'm clearly not qualified. But then I looked it up in the dictionary. Adjunct means something that is added but is not essential, unimportant, or unnecessary. That sounds about right. Plus, the institution which made the offer to me was Tokyo Institute of Technology, which means I could abbreviate my title as this. It's like I study third nipples or something. It's great. What else? They also let me write columns for Newsweek, and they put me on the cover. Oops, they put me on the cover a little while ago, which is great. I got to write 15 pages for this issue on political humor, which is not a thing here. They also let me be a commentator, which I make up stuff all the time. Sports commentator, TV host, from cooking shows to news to shopping to sports. It's bizarre. This is a crazy one. They let me be an interpreter. So not very often, but occasionally it happens. The most prominent example, November 2015, we were covering the election results live, and it took so long for the election results to be announced that the regular interpreter had already gone home. So when Trump emerged to give his victory speech, the director said, you translate. So I did. But all the while I was thinking, what? They really want me to do this? I'm not qualified. I'm going to mess this up. Which actually I'm sort of guessing is exactly the same thing that Trump was thinking at that time. Let's see, what else? Oh, this is a good one. Matador. Yes, I've done Japanese bullfighting, and they paid me. It's crazy. But Japanese bullfighting is a little bit different because you have the bulls fighting each other. All the human handler does is hold the reins and sort of steer them. But you don't want to say steer in front of bulls. They're a little sensitive. And finally, how about this one? Colonoscopy. I'm not sure what you call a person who gets a colonoscopy on national TV. It's not a colonoscopist or per, so I think it's a colonoscopy. It was memorable. It's much like my work as a commentator, except as a commentator, I generally pull stuff out of my ass. Anyway, so that's been my 20 years in the industry. I don't know why they keep letting me do this stuff. I'm clearly not qualified. But one perhaps reason is that I'm likable, honestly. And don't take my word for it. This is Line, which is one of Japan's most prominent social networking services. They did a survey a little while ago, and Japan's most likable commentator, that's me, number one. Isn't that crazy? But I'm not nearly as proud of this as I am of this ranking. You know what this is? Japan's most handsome yet not sexually attractive male celebrities. Yeah. And I rank right there at number 6. Oh, yeah. It's all the way in the way you think about it. It's handsome yet not sexually attractive. That means that as number 6, I'm more handsome than all these actors and musicians and somehow more sexually attractive than these guys who are high up in the ranking. Anyway, that's me. For the last 20 years, I've been doing all this crazy work which they allow you to do when you call yourself, without all of those other titles, just multi-talent, which is a catchphrase for someone without one particular talent. And come to think of it, it's pretty close to what I was doing 20 years ago and 20 years before that. It's not that crazy. It all seems to be leading up to this. The tough paperboy years of my childhood taught me discipline and perseverance. The activities gave me a wide range of skills and experiences and taught me about teamwork and leadership, problem solving. And my years at Harvard taught me that I could get an A minus without doing the reading. And all of this is helping me out now. Yeah, it seems like destiny. Perhaps I believe in divine intervention after all. All right, that's it. I'm sorry about the lack of uh, sound for the Manzai. I don't know how to fix that. If you give me a second, I'll fix it while you're asking me a question.
All right. Thank you so much, Pat. That was fantastic. And the a lot that was fun and a lot that was really fascinating. And we have about 15 minutes for questions. So people in the audience, why don't you send them in via chat and I'll pick up and choose some of them. It's possible that if you were using Zoom, you might
Share
have had
screen,
to,
perhaps?
when there's something to click share audio when you do a share screen, but you're not actually sharing the screen. So I'm not sure if that's the reason.
I'll go to the other computer and share the screen. Although I'm a little worried. I'm pretty sure I got more of a laugh with the lack of sound that I'm going to get with the sound.
Right.
It's
But
not
I
exactly
wanted to, while we're waiting for some chats, well,
I'll pull up
Patrick,
one here.
can you hear me? Uh,
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask you to say a bit about was the latest book, because I went to the trouble of reading a good part of it last night, so I have to ask you. Um, the discussion was quite interesting about the sort of comparison between the experience of poverty in the United States and Japan, and if you could sort of give a very brief
Absolutely.
condensation of the portion of that that focuses on Japan or the comparison, I
I'd be
think
happy to.
that would be it.
The thing that sticks out to me, living in America and Japan, especially because I was sort of I was in a tight financial situation myself, but I was lucky to be in a good school district, and that made all the difference. Here in Japan, the national education system is very uh, I don't want to say fixated, but it's one of its highest priorities is eliminating the education gap. There are some differences between municipalities, for example, but uh, there aren't really pronounced poor areas, poor schools. The schools aren't funded by um, property taxes like they are in America, for example. And that makes a big difference. And the I wrote in the book, you probably noticed, Dr. Gordon, that I think poverty is much less visible for that reason. And the communal response is also that much less pronounced. So you don't see very many MPOs or NGOs um, focusing on poverty or alleviating poverty here. We have lots of that going on in America. And of course, we get tax breaks for um, donating to things like that. And a lot of people do that. And the government, I think, in America sort of delegates responsibility for caring for the weakest in society because people are willing to stand up. In Japan, the dealing with poverty, dealing with single mothers, dealing with um, lack of childcare, all of these things are assumed to be the responsibility of the government, and the nation puts pressure on the government, and the government actually moves pretty well. So
Thank
this is yeah. By the way, the OECD numbers, America's poverty rate is just a little bit higher than Japan's, but they're both in like the bottom 5 or 6. It's pretty bad.
right. Bottom or top? I mean, right. Bottom in the sense of the
Yeah, the worst.
worst. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See
Yes.
how not funny I am when I'm talking about a serious subject?
Yes. Well, let me. I want to ask you something that's at the intersection of funny and serious that came in from one of the grad students here at
Sure.
Harvard, Leah Justin Jinitz. She notes, and I agree, that it's publicly criticizing people is perhaps more difficult in Japan than in other countries and in a more and more conservative society. She wonders if you feel frustrated as a commentator if you say something harsh or critical or unwelcome. Do you have to self-censor around political topics, extremely,
Yeah.
say, gay marriage or something when you're speaking publicly?
Excellent question. Um, Topics, not so much. I've been a strong proponent of gay marriage since I started being a commentator, which is probably about 15 years ago, maybe. Um, haven't had any uh, pushback on that. I'm a pacifist. I'm a big fan of the Japanese Constitution, and I make that clear. And I don't get much reaction to that. Have to be careful about emperor issues. Have to be careful about uh, China, Japan, Korea, Japan relations. I did get fake news uh, about 12, 13 months ago, I guess. A guy took a quote that I didn't actually say and wrote it up in a newspaper article, and the right wing ran with it. But that's more the exception than the rule. I think there's a lot of self censorship when it comes to criticizing people, using proper names. But as far as censoring yourself about topics, not so much.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do think emperor jokes are probably the toughest or
Oh
maybe
yeah,
fundamentally impossible.
not a good idea.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I've been waiting for the Japanese version of The Crown to show up on TV. But I'm going to have to wait probably
Yeah.
until 2 or 3 lives from now for that. Um, One question from a viewer, although it came to me privately, but I think he meant it to be asked to you publicly. Can you say a bit about things you're doing to leverage your fame to help people?
Well, that's a great another great question. The book is part of it. I mean, it's also self-serving because I get to go on, TV shows and radio shows and talk about the book, which is increasing my visibility. But it's also hopefully increasing visibility of an important subject, which people don't actually pay a lot of attention to. Like I
Hmm.
said, poverty here is not as visible. It's not as prominent as in America. We even in one of the biggest cities in the world, we have a tiny, tiny homeless problem, for
Hmm.
example.
Uh,
Um, So hopefully that's one way. I also sort of donate my time and effort to sort of prominent things like UNICEF. Uh, do I'll stand and shake hands and ask for donations for UNICEF, or we'll do the 24-hour TV thing or whatever. I probably don't do enough. Um, most of us guilty liberals probably feel like we don't do enough. Uh, but I think like active celebrities in Japan are a much rarer breed in general. So I don't want it to do it so prominently that it feels like I'm using this as a springboard for fame or recognition. So I honestly, I sort of use my fame to make money, which I then donate, which is easier.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it's a trick. I think Osaka Naomi is somebody who's pushing the envelope that in an interesting and positive way. So maybe that space
Certainly.
that those avenues will open up a bit. We have a question from Professor Jacobson, the head of the head of our Japanese language program here. He wants to
Welcome.
know a little bit more about how you acquired Japanese. Was it, and he puts in quotes or asterisk quotes, was it totally self-study? No classes, no tutors. He's just flabbergasted because you're putting him out of business potentially.
Yes, yes. I debated about whether to put this in the material today, but yeah, I've spent a total of $45 on Japanese study over the course of my uh, career here. That was the $45 was three $15 sets of kanji cards. Other than that, I borrowed a textbook the first time I moved over, and I guess I spent some money on pencils and notebooks. I wish I could show them to you, but I have these stacks of notebooks that I just wrote down every word that I heard that I didn't know. And I still take notes like in my phone of new words I don't know. But yeah, I didn't take any classes, didn't have a teacher. And I feel really bad for everyone who's like trudging through the snow for these early morning Japanese lessons at the Reischauer Center. That's tough.
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, I'm impressed by many things you've done, but if that you learned Japanese the way you did to the extent you did, it still blows my mind.
I appreciate it. Anyone can do it with $45 and 30 years in the country.
Yes. Well, I know
But
people who
30
spent
years
30
is a
years in
pretty
the
big
country who
investment.
haven't made any progress at all, to be honest. And
But that's
so,
true.
but let's move on.
Right.
Diana, Professor Eck, Diana asked the question, she's interested about mistranslation humor. Is that an ongoing source of material for you, jokes about mistranslation?
Well, that's a great question. And thank you, Diana. It's awesome to see you. Not so much because you need a fully bilingual audience to make it work. But sometimes, for example, and I do English like corners on shows sometimes where I'll introduce something which is funny. And I just did a radio show with my partner yesterday where it's just random uh, ah, debriefing. We had this thing about debriefing. He said shanshan kaigi in Japanese, which is like a quick meeting. How would I say this in English? And I said, well, uh, you could say debriefing, but you'd have to make it clear that you weren't going to take someone's pants off, which took a minute, right? But you know, that kind of humor is funny if you explain it and people get it. And after they know it, then they want to use it again. So I think it's a great way to learn a language, for example, to learn those homonym play on word kind of things. Um, I do occasionally point out mistranslations in Japanese subtitles. The one I remember most was from a movie called Romeo Must Die. It's a Hong Kong movie, and they're speaking in English. And one brother says to another brother, um, my parents or our parents pushed me so hard I went into medicine. Like they pushed me so hard I went into medicine, like to become a doctor. And the Japanese translation was, our parents pushed us so hard I started doing drugs. Not close enough.
Yes. Maybe close enough. So I have there's a question about
Hmm.
actually a very difficult event a decade ago, the disaster. You were in Japan at the time. One of the
Hmm.
visiting scholars at Reischauer, or incoming next fall visiting scholar, he had to postpone because of the pandemic. Wants to know what was your response at the time, and what were your thoughts on the response in Japan to the earthquake and tsunami? I mean, that's a very big question. But
It is, but it's especially timely because the 10th year anniversary was just a couple of days ago, and we had a big earthquake in the same area shortly thereafter. So people are thinking a lot more about the events of March 2011. And my personal feelings are that the government shot themselves in the foot. They don't need to be hiding information or downplaying an incident. I think people are more afraid of what they don't know than honest, straightforward facts. And the fact that one time, if the government is found to be um, misconveying information or hiding information or downplaying the seriousness of the situation, then people are going to expect that they're doing that all the time and not trust them even when they are telling the truth. And that was a terrible, terrible mistake. Uh, Whether it could have been prevented, probably, but humans don't generally plan their cities on thousand-year-old records. There was, the record of a tsunami which had been like 30 meters high in that area, in the Sandiku area, and it's like 1,000 years old, 600, 800 years old. Yes, it's there in the common lore, but no one's going to spend an extra $30 billion to prevent something which only happens every 1,000 years. I thought it was a tragedy, but if the government had handled the response better, I probably would have given them a passing grade.
yes, I mean, especially in relation to the nuclear disaster, it was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
that was the case.
the natural the response to natural disasters in general here is amazing. The citizens of the country are critical of their government and they push hard. And if there's a problem getting something to anywhere at any time, they're on it. And we in the media just rag on the government continually. But generally 6 hours after something happens, there are tents and food and sleeping facilities and doctors on the scene. It's amazing. They have, I mean, obviously have so many natural disasters that they have plenty of practice. But I think the response itself in general is great.
Yes, that's certainly my feeling too. We're at our time limit, but Shin has given me permission to go a few minutes over, and
Oh,
so I'm going to
easy
pick up
call.
two more questions. I know I'm sorry for those of you whose questions we won't get to ask, although I think we'll have ended up picking most. Um,
Mhm.
One question asks you to talk about the pros and cons of seeking success in I guess in your field, for being a gaijin or not. I mean, how do you weigh the ways in which, or how do you assess the ways in which that, well, you said there was going to be little competition compared to Hollywood, but maybe that's an advantage. Can you say something about disadvantages or challenges?
Well, as far as the difficulty level, you can probably judge from how many successful foreign talent there are. I was the first comedian to make a living, I think, ever in Japanese history, comedy history at least, a foreign comedian. And when I got on TV about 20 years ago, there were probably 6 or 7 prominent foreign talent. Now there's maybe 4. It's not
Really,
like
there's
there's
fewer.
been,
Yeah,
yeah, there's
yeah.
not like been this onslaught. Maybe I'm taking all their work. Who knows? Taking all the air, oxygen out of the room. Who knows? But it's it's easy to stand out, but it's hard to break through. And I used to think this was like discriminatory, but when you think about what I talked about in the middle of the show about the high context culture, how everyone knows everything everyone else knows, it's really hard to participate if you don't. If you're There are lots of half talent who grew up in Japan, tons, on TV now, but actually growing up abroad, not having seen the manga or anime from the 90s, for example, which people will refer to, uh, not knowing all the pro wrestlers or the prominent politicians. You can get to that point, but it's a really high bar, high hurdle. I don't think it's discriminatory as much as just a fact of life. I think I
Yeah,
lucked out.
yeah, I think it is. I mean, that what you just said made a lot of sense. I was very, as somebody who works at Harvard, I was proud to see on that list of the 10 most, was it trusted or highly evaluated commentators? That wasn't
Oh,
comedians, I
thank you.
don't think. That
No.
there were, and that was foreigners and Japanese, but there were two from Harvard. There was you, and then 4 levels or 5 levels below was my friend Robert Campbell, who
Yeah, my friend
um,
too. Good guy.
went on. He started out in literature, and
Yeah, he's
he
still in
actually
literature.
he actually wasn't an adjunct professor, so there he is. So we've got
And there's
two of the
actually
top 10,
and there's another American right here.
right?
Robert Campbell
Spectre.
is not exactly.
I'm a little less a fan of his, but that's just my personal viewpoint, and
That's all
I don't attribute it to you.
right.
One more question
Okay.
from Olga Kumenko. What's the next job title you want to add to your Macy?
Oh, that's a great one. Uh, I'd love to be an adjunct professor at Harvard. Need any unnecessary or
Well, now with Zoom, if we continue with the Zoom thing, it's actually not exactly a joke.
yeah, remote? It's possible.
We'll
You
work on it.
you need a Monzai master's course, right? Um,
Yeah.
that's a good question. I would love to be um, I would love to do a film which makes it abroad. I've done plenty of films. Actually, I've done that many films. I need to do more films, but I'd love to do something which makes it onto Netflix, translated into America or in English, so that my family and friends in America can see it. That'd be cool. I don't have to. I don't have to do these self-aggrandizing PowerPoint presentations every time I want my dearly beloved back at home to know how cool I am.
Right. Well, that we can work with you on the professor thing, but you'll have to figure out the Hollywood thing on your own, Patrick. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so
Oh, thank
much.
you.
And I know, and there have been some other comments about how much people have enjoyed. And we can send you the chat file later so you
Oh,
can see what everybody has said, I think, right? And
that'd be
so I
lovely.
think now we adjourn
Um, before
the
you go, do you want to
proceedings.
spend 20 seconds and check out that 30-second, that 20-second short comedy here? I think I can put it
Oh,
on
if you,
my.
sure,
I
if
think
you've
I
got
can
it,
share screen.
if you've got it with sound.
Yeah, this will just be a good way to ruin my reputation before we're done. All right, so I'm going to share screen here. All right, here we go. Share screen. You allow me to share screen, right? Okay. And here we go.
Still no sound.
No sound?
You have to click something at the bottom of the square share screen thing that says share audio also, I think.
Really? Okay, let me see. Hold
Yeah,
on.
I've messed up with this 3 or 4 times in my course this past fall.
I may never get it. Um, it's terrible. I, ah, I hate
Oh,
Zoom.
our
All
tech
right.
expert says you have to unshare and reshare to get it to work. So you have to unshare, and then before you reshare, you'll see a little box to put a check mark in that allows you to uh, activate video or something like that, or turn on
Turn on
audio.
audio, yeah.
Okay, share sound. There it is.
That's the one. That's the one.
Okay.
First you click that, then you share the screen.
Where to go? Where to go? All right. Huh?
I'm Pakkun.
I'm Makkun.
And together we are
Pakkun Makkun.
And here's our short sketch, Taxi Driver. Taxi! Plaza Hotel, please.
Okay.
Wow! You're an amazing driver.
Really? Maybe I could get the driver's license.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Wasn't it quite worth the wait, was it?
worth every minute. All right, so now we will adjourn, and I think there's a Nijikai for the program fellows, but that will be through a separate login. So do we all have to log out, everybody, and then
Do I have to log out?
Yep.
you have to log out and then
So
click
this link, we'll
click
just
the second link.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining. This was fantastic.
Thanks, everybody. See you back in America someday.